One of the most important local representatives here at the Fish Fry is our local water district, Mesa Water. And with me to discuss Mesa's participation and some other issues is one of the board members of Mesa Water, Fred Bockmiller. Welcome, Fred.
Hey, thank you very much.
What are you doing here at the Fish Fry? Why does Mesa Water come out to things like this?
Well, it's important to get our name out in the public. We provide water, and there's not one more thing more important for life than water.
That's right. What is your service area, Fred, and approximately how many people does Mesa serve?
Mesa Water serves about 100,000 people in nearly all of Costa Mesa, part of Newport Beach, and some unincorporated territory, including the world-famous John Wayne Airport.
Now, for a lot of people out there in our audience, they're familiar with state government, federal government, the Board of Supervisors, the county and cities, but this is different. You are a special district. Could you describe that briefly?
Sure. Mesa Water is a special district formed by an act of the state legislature in 1960, and we've updated our name over time. It was called the Costa Mesa County Water District Merger Act of 1960. What we do is provide water within our service territory, and our charge is to do whatever is necessary to provide water within our service territory.
And you're like Irvine Ranch Water District and other locals in that regard, yes?
Yes, we are. The Irvine Ranch is incorporated under a very slightly different act of the state legislature called the California Water District, but we're essentially the same thing.
Okay, now the water issues are very, very controversial, and I think here in Orange County in particular, everybody is aware of the importance of conservation and wise water use. Could you comment on those very two important priorities?
Certainly. So we have a water supply in Costa Mesa. Mesa Water District over a long period of time has ensured that we have a water supply. However, we're only as reliable as our neighbors and everyone else in the area. So we've asked everyone to conserve and use water wisely. Obey our rules and as we've enacted for the emergency drought response. And as over time we get our water supply back, we'll ease those restrictions. Incredibly important to keep up with what we're needing to do.
Now, one of the things that I think the general public is not necessarily aware of is that these water conservation goals are not necessarily discretionary. They are set by perhaps a state water board. Could you describe the conservation goals and who sets them?
All right, so the governor asked that 25% of urban water use be conserved. Urban water use is a small fraction of water use in the state, but it is what was asked for. It was charged the state water board to come up with rules as to how that was going to happen. Mesa Water ended up being assigned a 20% conservation based on our previous water use. We were already fairly water efficient, so our level of conservation was lower. Other agencies were assigned higher. Some agencies were assigned 36%. Some agencies were assigned as low as something like 12 or even 8%. Mesa Water was assigned to 20%. And our residents conserved well over that. We made 21 point something percent.
Now, are these annual targets, Fred, or like in the air quality field, they're maybe extended over longer periods of time where you can have a bubble and cross mix, or must these targets be met on an annual basis or over a 5-year period? What's the time span on these goals?
So it was sort of a wonky thing. What they did is they looked at what 2013 consumption was for a particular period and compared you from, I think it was March through December of that period, and you looked at 2013 water consumption and then compared it to that baseline. So that was just prior to the governor's emergency drought declaration, which is why they used that 2013. It wasn't necessarily a representative of year or an average or anything like that. It was just that particular year, and that was considered the baseline. And then you were judged on what you did, how you did each but it was over that entire year, not just on a per month basis. We tracked it more tightly to see how we were doing, and we adjusted our water conservation measures to make sure that we made our goal.
That sounds really important way to go about it. Now, I find it interesting. I think it's pretty interesting that in the midst of this water conservation push and the clear necessity for people to be aware of wise water use, Costa Mesa, Newport Beach, and all of Orange County, it seems to be, are under considerable pressures for growth. There seems to be more people who want to live here, more development. Could you please comment on the relationship between wise water use and water conservation and increased growth, development, population? What is that relationship and what are the impacts as you see it?
So some years ago, Mesa Water did a study on what we called the East Side infill. We saw about a decade ago this trend going toward This is a very popular place to live with an ideal and benign climate. Everybody wants to live here. The pressure to live here will continue regardless of what people try to do. So what we saw was houses on the east side, fee lots, 7,000, 8,000, 10,000 square foot lots turned into some single house to 4 units. So we saw that, we called it the east side infill study. We looked at what was going to happen, and what we did was take a comparison of a property where they had previously been a residential unit, looked at what its historic water use was over time and compared it to the then. We had data on that property from the now 4, I think it was, units that were put on it. And what we found out was that the actual water use was less than had been previously used because...
Interesting.
Yeah, most of the water is used outside. Water efficient plumbing indoors, now required by the plumbing code, retrofitting against a 1950s tract home that may or may not have been retrofitted with water efficient appliances. So each unit, though they may have more people, the overall consumption is lower because there's less irrigated landscape.
Right. Now, one of the things that people who like to comment on the growth issue, and here in Costa Mesa, just in case our listeners aren't aware of this, there is a smart growth initiative on the ballot, and growth continues to be a very important and controversial subject here in Costa Mesa. And given the relationship between growth and water, does the Mesa Water Board ever consider taking positions on development projects that go before the city council? Just yes or no?
No.
No, okay. Now, another thing, too, that everybody talks about is we're not in the Inland Empire. In fact, Costa Mesa is strategically positioned right next to a very large body of water called the Pacific Ocean. And I found that there's a general misunderstanding overall about desalination. Do you want to comment on desalination as an option and any position that Mesa Water's board may have taken on this issue?
Some years ago, and people can look it up, Mesa Water's board voted to support the concept of desalination. Desalination is a potentially reliable water supply. After all, the ocean isn't going away. There are some considerations of rising sea level and location of a plant if you were to install one, but the fact is that the technology is widely used all over the world. It's not so widely used in the United States, but all over the world desal is used. It's widely available technology. I may be the only board member in the county on any agency that has ever had to operate a desal plant of both kinds, reverse osmosis and thermal, where it actually meant whether I was going to live or die. I was a ship's officer and made sure that the desalinating equipment on the ship, I was in the middle of the ocean, and if the water stopped, the engine stopped. So it's not something you want to have happen.
Right. Now, when you were on KOCI Radio's environment show, The Green Orange, we talked about this issue some, and as I recall, the energy efficiency and overall capital cost of desalination is a relatively important factor, obviously. You want to comment on cost and energy with respect to desal, Fred?
So some years ago, desal is very, very high energy intense. It is more energy intensive than potentially some other sources of water. But you have to look at where our water comes from now. So right now we use massive pumps to move water over the Tehachapi at an ever decreasing quantity, but it still takes a huge amount of energy. If you look at the amount of greenhouse gas emissions for water taken over the Tehachapis to here, comparing that source, which is declining, to the now very efficient relative to what it was 20 years ago and 40 years ago, desalination has become more and more efficient in terms of energy input to water produced. And looking at greener sources of electricity as the grid becomes greener and greener through the deployment of renewable technologies, so therefore the carbon footprint of each bit of increment of electricity used is reduced. You look at the overall carbon footprint of desalinated water is improving over time. And at some point, it will become more cost effective than just imported water. And because the imported water source is declining, it's not like you could say, oh, we'll just increase our imported water. It's not happening.
Okay, Fred, well, I'm going to have to run to the stage here, but I want to ask you one last question. How often does your board meet, and how can we get more information about these water issues?
So our board meets on the second Thursday of every month at the evening at 6 p.m. We used to meet at 7. We meet at 6 p.m. and we have committee meetings, which consist of the whole board. We meet several for the engineering and operations, finance, and the LPAC, the Legislation and Public Affairs Committee for the district meets on a regular basis, which you can see on our Mesa Water website, mesawater.org.
Okay, so we're heading into the hot summer, and you can come see Fred and other people at the Mesa Water booth here at the Lions Fish Fry, which runs through Sunday. Any quick words on what people should think about as they head into the summer? Use water wisely, and just how would you cap the best sort of incentive statement you could about reaching those water goals, Fred?
Use all the water you need. Don't waste a drop.
Fred Bockmiller, board member, Mesa Water District. Thank you very much.
Thank you.